The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence in Evelyn's small kitchen as she placed her teacup on the counter. Another morning begun the same way. Early, quiet, predictable. At 53, Evelyn's life had settled into a rhythm of solitude, one she'd long ago convinced herself was comfortable. Her days were a series of routines. A walk through the park after breakfast, a few hours in her studio painting landscapes no one would ever see, an afternoon of books and tea. Evenings were spent watching the news or a classic movie, followed by an early retreat to bed. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she was younger, but it was safe. Yet, sometimes, in the stillness of the night, Evelyn would feel a pang of something. Loneliness, perhaps, or the ghost of yearning for a life that hadn't materialized. It was on one such quiet morning, during her weekly grocery run, that something shifted. The fluorescent lights of the market buzzed softly as she moved through the aisles, her cart half full of fresh vegetables, a baguette, and the staples she always bought. She reached for a jar of marinara sauce on the top shelf, struggling slightly to grasp it. Before she could retrieve it, a hand appeared beside hers and plucked the jar effortlessly. "Here you go," a voice said, warm and casual. Evelyn turned to see a man, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, holding out the jar with a friendly smile. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his green eyes bright with kindness. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. "No problem," he replied, his grin widening. "You're tall, but these shelves are ridiculously high." She chuckled, feeling a flicker of something she couldn't name. "Tell me about it. I think they're designed to make everyone feel short." He laughed, a genuine, easy sound, and for a moment, Evelyn forgot about the monotony of her morning. "I'm Liam," he said, extending a hand. "Evelyn," she replied, taking it. His handshake was firm but gentle, his presence unexpectedly warm. They exchanged a few pleasantries about the store's endless rearranging of items, the sudden price hike on avocados, and then went their separate ways. As Evelyn continued her shopping, she couldn't help but glance at him from time to time. There was something about him that lingered, a lightness, an energy she hadn't felt in years. By the time she left the store, the encounter had etched itself into her thoughts. That night, as she prepared her solitary dinner, Evelyn caught herself smiling. It had been such a small moment, so ordinary, yet it had brightened her day in a way she couldn't explain. For the first time in a long time, her world felt a little less gray. And though she didn't know it yet, that fleeting meeting with Liam was the beginning of something she'd never expected. The following week, Evelyn found herself back at the grocery store, though it wasn't quite time to replenish her usual staples. She told herself she was simply in the mood to browse, perhaps to pick up a few items she'd missed. But deep down, she knew there was a flicker of hope guiding her steps, a subtle longing for a chance to see Liam again. She moved through the aisles slowly, her cart half empty, when a familiar voice called out behind her. "Evelyn!" Turning, she saw Liam approaching, a cheerful grin lighting up his face. He held a basket filled with a curious mix of items, granola bars, a bouquet of wildflowers, and a bottle of orange juice. "Hi, Liam," she said, unable to suppress the warmth in her tone. "Are you always this early? Or is this a coincidence?" he asked, stopping beside her cart. "Maybe a little of both," she replied with a small smile. "And you? Stocking up for the week?" "Kind of," he said, holding up the bouquet. "The flowers are for my mom. It's her birthday today." Evelyn's heart softened at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "That's sweet. She's lucky to have a son who remembers things like that. Trust me, she's reminded me enough over the years," he joked, though the fondness in his voice was evident. Their conversation meandered from the merits of fresh flowers to the absurdity of overpriced gourmet peanut butter. It felt easy, natural, as though they'd known each other longer than a week. At one point, Liam glanced into her cart and smirked. "2 jars of marinara this time? Planning a pasta feast?" Evelyn laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "What can I say? I'm embracing preparedness." As they talked, a surprising ease settled over Evelyn. It wasn't just Liam's quick wit or his engaging stories. It was the way he seemed genuinely interested in her words, his attention unhurried and sincere. Before they parted, he said, "Hey, there's a cafe nearby I love. They do great coffee." If you're ever in the mood for something stronger than tea, let me know. Evelyn hesitated, her heart skipping at his casual suggestion. Was this a simple gesture of friendship, or was there something more behind it? Either way, she nodded, feeling a flicker of excitement she hadn't known in years. Maybe I will, she said, her voice light but carrying a weight she couldn't quite define. The rest of her errands that day passed in a haze. The warmth of Liam's smile, the invitation hanging in the air. It all felt like a break in the monotony of her days, like the first rays of sunlight after a long, gray winter. That evening, as she stood by her kitchen window, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft hues of gold and lavender, Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about him. About how his presence had brought a sense of brightness and connection she hadn't realized she craved. Perhaps this was nothing more than a passing friendship, a fleeting kindness shared between two people. But in the quiet of her thoughts, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder if it might become something more. Over the following weeks, Evelyn and Liam's paths seemed to cross with increasing frequency. A chance meeting at the grocery store led to shared conversations over coffee at the cafe Liam had mentioned. Each encounter brought them closer, the growing ease between them laced with something unspoken yet undeniable. Evelyn found herself anticipating these moments, her heart lifting whenever she spotted him. He was a burst of color in her otherwise muted days, and she cherished the time they spent together, even if it was just a quick chat over cappuccinos. One afternoon, as they sat at a corner table by the cafe window, Liam leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know, you're one of the most interesting people I've met in a while," he said. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Interesting?" "Yes, you," he replied with a grin. "You've lived, Evelyn. The way you talk about your art, the stories you share, it's inspiring. Most people I know are so predictable. But you're different." She felt her cheeks flush, the compliment landing somewhere deep inside her. "I don't know if I'd call myself interesting," she said, her voice softer. "But thank you. That means a lot." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Why do you downplay yourself so much?" The question lingered in the air between them. Evelyn hesitated, unsure how to respond. It wasn't something she consciously thought about. How she'd let herself fade into the background over the years, choosing safety over risk, contentment over pursuit. I just got used to being quiet," she admitted finally. "Life has a way of making you feel smaller if you let it." Liam's gaze didn't waver. "Well, I think you're anything but small. And you shouldn't forget that." His words stayed with her long after their coffee cups were empty and they parted ways. That night, as she sat in her studio, staring at a blank canvas, Evelyn thought about what Liam had said. It wasn't just his kindness or his unwavering attention that drew her in. It was the way he seemed to see her, truly see her, in a way no one had in years. The next time they met, Evelyn suggested a walk through the park. The idea surprised even herself. She couldn't remember the last time she had initiated something like this. Liam agreed readily, and the afternoon unfolded with the easy rhythm that had come to define their time together. They strolled along tree-lined paths, the crisp autumn air carrying the faint scent of leaves and earth. As they talked, Evelyn felt herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, sharing stories of her youth, her art, and the dreams she'd quietly let go of. Liam listened intently, his questions thoughtful, his laughter quick and warm. He shared pieces of his own life, his travels, his ambitions, and his struggles with finding a sense of purpose. "It's funny," he said as they paused by a small pond, watching ducks glide across the water. "Sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to have everything figured out by now. But I don't. Not even close." Evelyn smiled gently. "I don't think anyone ever really has it all figured out. Life's more about the trying than the knowing." He looked at her then, his green eyes searching hers. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," she admitted, "but that doesn't mean it's not worth it." In that moment, Evelyn felt a shift, a deeper connection forming between them, one that went beyond friendship. It was unspoken but tangible, a thread pulling them closer together. Later, as she walked home alone, Evelyn's thoughts swirled. She couldn't ignore the way her heart had quickened when Liam smiled at her, the warmth that spread through her when he leaned in just a little closer to hear her speak. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Her world was changing, and Liam was at the center of it. Evelyn couldn't pinpoint the exact moment her feelings for Liam began to shift. At first, she had dismissed the warmth in her chest as gratitude. For his kindness, for the companionship that had filled a once lonely void in her life. But gratitude didn't explain the way her breath caught when he laughed, or how her heart raced when his hand brushed hers during one of their walks. The realization struck her one evening as she stood in her kitchen preparing dinner. She had just set her phone down after reading Liam's text, a simple note about a new cafe he'd discovered and how he thought she'd love their carrot cake. Her heart fluttered. It wasn't just the text. It was everything. The way he had become a fixture in her life, the way his presence lingered in her thoughts long after they parted, the way his words seemed to echo in her quietest moments. And then, like a wave crashing over her, she understood. She had fallen for him. The spoon in her hand clattered against the countertop as she leaned on the edge of the sink, overwhelmed. How had this happened? She was 53. He was a what? 30? 32? The gap between their ages loomed like a chasm, one she had no idea how to cross. Evelyn spent the rest of the evening trying to rationalize her feelings. Perhaps it was just loneliness, she told herself, or the novelty of having someone new in her life, someone who brought light and laughter to her otherwise predictable days. But no matter how many excuses she crafted, the truth remained. She cared for Liam in a way she hadn't cared for anyone in years. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a tangled web of fear and longing. What would he think if he knew? Would he laugh? Pity her? Worse, would he withdraw, leaving her to navigate the hollow space his absence would create? Society's judgment loomed large in her mind as well. Women her age weren't supposed to fall for younger men. It was unseemly, impractical, a reversal of the natural order that people rarely approved of. Yet, beneath the layers of doubt, a quiet voice whispered, "Why not? Why shouldn't she feel this way? Was it so wrong to find joy, to be seen, to love, even if it defied convention?" The following day, Evelyn avoided texting Liam. She told herself she needed space, time to sort through her emotions before she could face him again. But when her phone buzzed with a message from him that afternoon, a photo of the carrot cake with the caption, "Saving you a slice," her resolve crumbled. Her reply was quick, light, masking the storm in her chest. Evelyn wasn't ready to admit her feelings to Liam, or even to herself fully. But as the days passed, she realized that the line between friendship and something more had already blurred. The question was no longer whether she had feelings for him. The question was what she would do about them. Evelyn's thoughts swirled in a constant storm, her emotions veering wildly between hope and fear. The more time she spent with Liam, the stronger her feelings grew, yet so did her hesitation. One late autumn afternoon, as they strolled through the park, Evelyn found herself stealing glances at him. His laugh was easy, his presence magnetic, and she realized how much brighter her days had become because of him. "You're quiet today," Liam said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Evelyn blinked and gave him a small smile. "Just thinking. The changing leaves always make me reflective." "I get that," he said, nudging a fallen leaf with his shoe. "There's something about autumn, isn't there? It feels like both an ending and a beginning." His words lingered in the crisp air, resonating with the uncertainty she felt. Evelyn knew she couldn't keep her feelings bottled up forever. But how could she bridge the gap between them without risking everything? Later that evening, standing alone in her kitchen, Evelyn made a decision. She would take a step, not a grand declaration, but a simple gesture to see where things might lead. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed out a message. "I've been meaning to thank you for all the moments of light you've brought into my days. Would you like to come over for dinner this Friday? I'd love to cook for you." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, her heart pounding as the message disappeared into the void. The minutes that followed felt endless, every buzz of her phone making her jump. When his reply finally came, she hesitated before opening it. "I'd love to. What time?" Relief and nervous excitement flooded her all at once. Evelyn quickly responded, her thoughts already racing through potential menus and how she could make the evening special without making it feel overly formal. Friday arrived faster than she expected. She spent the day preparing, choosing her best wine, setting the table with care, and cooking a dish she hadn't made in years. her signature pasta with homemade marinara sauce. As the clock ticked closer to 7, Evelyn caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her reflection surprised her. There was a spark in her eyes she hadn't seen in years, a warmth that made her feel alive. When the doorbell rang, her heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath and opened the door to find Liam standing there, holding another bouquet of wildflowers. "These reminded me of you," he said, his smile lighting up the evening. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm as she took the flowers, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "Come in." As they settled into the cozy atmosphere of her home, Evelyn couldn't help but feel that this evening was more than just a dinner. It was a step toward something she wasn't sure she deserved but couldn't deny she wanted. And as they clinked their glasses of wine together over candlelight, Evelyn allowed herself to hope, for the first time in years, that love might still have a place in her life. The evening unfolded in a soft haze of warmth and comfort, as though the world outside had receded, leaving just the two of them within the walls of her cozy dining room. The gentle clink of forks and the occasional hum of a quiet song playing in the background created a sense of intimacy that felt almost sacred. Liam was his usual self, charming, easy to talk to, with a natural ability to make Evelyn laugh. But there was something different in the air tonight. It wasn't just the way he looked at her when she spoke, or the subtle tenderness in his voice when he complimented the meal. It was the way he seemed to be present, fully, in a way she hadn't allowed anyone to be in her life for a long time. "Your pasta's amazing," he said between bites, his eyes shining with genuine appreciation. "I'll have to get the recipe from you." Evelyn smiled, watching him with a quiet affection. "It's all about the sauce, really," she replied. "I've been making it for years." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting from his plate to her eyes. "I don't know how you do it, Evelyn," he said softly, "but everything about this feels effortless, like it's meant to be." Her heart stuttered in her chest, the weight of his words sinking into her bones. She looked away, her hands suddenly clammy, unsure of how to respond. Was he feeling what she was feeling, or was she reading too much into it? Liam, sensing her sudden hesitation, reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. The simple contact sent a ripple of warmth through her pulse quickening in response. "I know this may sound strange," he continued, his voice low and earnest, "but I've been thinking about this evening a lot. And about us." Evelyn's breath caught. She didn't know whether to speak or hold her silence, so she simply waited, her heart hammering in her chest. "I think," he said, his words measured, "I think I've fallen for you." The admission, so raw and unguarded, left her momentarily speechless. She hadn't expected him to voice what had been creeping up on her for weeks, no months. She tried to suppress it, to compartmentalize her emotions into neat little boxes, but in this moment, with him sitting there, looking at her with such sincerity, the truth was undeniable. Evelyn blinked back the sudden mist of tears that threatened to blur her vision. The vulnerability in his eyes matched her own, and for the first time in ages, she felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, the words trembling in her throat. "You don't have to say anything," Liam replied gently, his hand still resting over hers. "I just wanted you to know. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her mind raced. This was it, the moment where everything could change. She had spent so much time questioning whether she deserved this, whether it was right for her to feel this way. But looking into Liam's eyes, she knew she didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to trust what her heart was telling her. With a deep breath, Evelyn finally spoke, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "I've been afraid," she admitted, her gaze locking with his. "Afraid of what this means. Afraid of what people might say." Liam's thumb traced gentle circles over the back of her hand. "I don't care what people say. I care about you." And in that moment, Evelyn let go. She allowed herself to feel what she had been holding back for so long, an all-encompassing rush of affection, desire, and connection. Their kiss, when it came, was slow and tentative, a quiet exploration of unspoken longing. It wasn't hurried, nor was it a declaration. It was simply the natural next step, the completion of a conversation that had been happening between them for weeks. As they pulled away, Evelyn found herself smiling, the fear and hesitation that had once held her captive now slipping away. "I'm scared," she confessed softly, her voice laced with the vulnerability she had long kept hidden. "But I want this Liam. I want you." His answer was a smile that reached deep into his eyes, warm and full of promise. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt certain. Certain that this unexpected connection, this tender, unanticipated love, was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks that followed that evening with Liam were a blur of warmth, joy, and quiet reflection. What had once been a spark of connection had quickly blossomed into something deeper, more profound. Evelyn had never imagined that love could feel this way at 53. So alive, so full of unexpected possibilities. They spent their days walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing. In the evenings, they cooked together. Sometimes the same meals Evelyn had made countless times, and sometimes new recipes Liam had introduced her to. He had a love for food, an energy that invigorated even her familiar routines. They were never in a rush, savoring the simple moments with a kind of reverence that was new to her. Yet despite the closeness that had blossomed between them, Evelyn couldn't escape the quiet undercurrent of doubt that often resurfaced in the stillness of her thoughts. She still caught herself wondering if their love was some fleeting thing, a beautiful but short-lived chapter in both their lives. The age gap felt like a shadow, lingering just behind the brightness of their connection. And sometimes Evelyn couldn't help but worry how it would affect their future. Would Liam's feelings change as time went on? Would he grow restless, longing for a life and experiences she could no longer provide? One evening, as they sat on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sun set over the horizon, Evelyn finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at her. "Liam," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the fiery orange sky, "do you think about the future? About us?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to her. "Of course I do. I think about it all the time." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat at the intensity in his voice, but she couldn't keep the knot of worry from tightening in her chest. "I mean, do you think about the difference in our ages? What it might mean for us down the road?" Liam took her hand, his fingers strong and steady. "I think about it, yes. But here's the thing, Evelyn. We can't know what the future holds. None of us can. I can't predict what will happen in 10 years or 20, but what I do know is that right now this is real. And I don't want to spend my time worrying about what-ifs." His words were simple, but they struck a chord deep inside her. He wasn't concerned with the things that had occupied her thoughts for so long, the things she had feared would tear them apart. He was present in the moment, and for him that was enough. Evelyn felt a sense of release, a loosening of the tension that had gripped her heart for weeks. She had spent so much time trying to shape the future, to control it, but Liam had reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. That love, true love, wasn't about holding on too tightly to the things we couldn't change. It was about surrendering to what was, embracing the connection they shared in the here and now, without constantly measuring it against time or expectations. And so, over the weeks that followed, Evelyn allowed herself to let go of the worry. Instead of constantly asking, "What if?" she began to focus on the joy of now. The warmth of his hand in hers, the softness of his voice, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt free. Free from the constraints of age, free from the judgment of others, and most importantly, free to love without fear. One evening, as they walked home from the grocery store, their hands brushing in the cool night air, Liam stopped and turned to face her. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I've never felt more at peace than I do right now. With you. With us." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling. "Me too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Liam's smile was warm, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're not just a part of my life, Evelyn. You are my life." The words settled in her chest like a promise. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn realized she didn't need to know how everything would unfold. She only needed to keep walking beside him, step by step, without fear or hesitation. And so, in that moment, with the stars above them and the promise of tomorrow unknown, Evelyn let herself embrace the beauty of their love, the kind of love that defied time, age, and every other obstacle life had placed in their way. The seasons shifted as they always do, and yet for Evelyn, Time seemed to have a different rhythm when she was with Liam. She no longer measured the days by the ticking of the clock or the advancing of her years. Instead, her life had become marked by laughter shared over a cup of coffee, by the quiet moments when their hands brushed as they walked side by side, and by the soft glow of candlelight flickering in the evenings they spent together. In the beginning, she had been so afraid of judgment, of what people might think, of how love between them could ever be perceived. But as the days passed, Evelyn began to realize that love was not about following the rules that others set. Love was about finding someone who made you feel seen, cherished, and whole, no matter what the world might say. She no longer cared about the whispered judgments or the looks of disapproval she occasionally encountered. What mattered now was the bond they shared, the intimacy they had built together. One afternoon, they were sitting on a bench in the park, the trees around them bare and still. The air had a crispness to it, a reminder that winter was approaching. Evelyn leaned into Liam's side, the familiar warmth of his body comforting her, grounding her in a way that was both calming and exhilarating. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft but certain. "About us, about this love." Liam turned his head to look at her, his eyes full of gentle curiosity. "What about it?" Evelyn smiled, her heart full. "How much I've learned, how much I've grown. It's strange, isn't it? To feel like I've lived so much of my life without this, without the kind of love that challenges you, that makes you see the world in a different way." Liam's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers as he listened intently. "I think we've both learned a lot," he said, his voice steady. "But the most important thing I've learned from you is that love doesn't have an expiration date. It's not bound by age or time. It just is." Evelyn's eyes filled with warmth. "You make me believe that," she said quietly. He chuckled softly, squeezing her hand. "I didn't think I had to convince you. I thought you already knew it." A small laugh escaped Evelyn's lips, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I know it now. But it's taken me a while to let go of all the things I thought were important, what other people would think, how life is supposed to look. It's funny how those things don't matter anymore." Liam kissed the top of her head, his voice tender. "It's the only thing that matters, Evelyn. You and me right now." As she sat there with him, enveloped in the love they had created together, Evelyn realized that the truth of love had always been simple. It wasn't about the fears, the doubts, or the judgment of others. It was about the willingness to be vulnerable, to trust, and to choose each other every single day, no matter what came their way. The world could continue spinning, the years could pass, and the opinions of others could continue to buzz in the background. But Evelyn knew this. Love wasn't about time, and it wasn't about what others expected. It was about connection, about two people who saw each other not for their age, their past, or their imperfections, but for the beauty and promise that existed in each moment they shared. She looked up at Liam, his face soft with affection, and felt a deep peace settle in her heart. She had embraced this love, not just because it was unexpected, but because it was real, and it had taught her more than she ever thought possible. "This love," she whispered, "it's given me a second chance. It's taught me to be brave again, to open my heart in ways I never thought I could." Liam smiled, pulling her closer. "It's the kind of love you deserve, Evelyn, and I'm grateful every day that I get to be the one to give it to you." And in that quiet moment, with the fading light of the day around them, Evelyn knew with certainty that love was something that could come at any stage in life. It didn't matter when or where it appeared, it only mattered that it was real. And this love, the one she had found with Liam, was more than she had ever dared to hope for. So she let herself lean into it, fully, without fear or hesitation. Because love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force of all, timeless, unyielding, and always worth embracing.